Before creation learned to speak, an unclaimed whisper drifted through the void. What becomes of a world when its God begins to doubt it? From that haunting question, this chronicle emerges, a fragment dredged from the buried archives of the Astral Imperivox, where memory and prophecy have long been indistinguishable. The cosmos trembles as we return to a world slowly devouring itself through the very faith that once sustained it, a realm caught between celestial salvation and annihilation. A shroud of broken constellations hangs over the ruined dominions, their pale glow reflecting upon cathedrals shattered by eons of divine warfare. Once, worshippers gathered beneath obsidian arches to praise the imperial sovereigns who guarded the firmament. Now, the arches lie twisted, melted into glass by the breath of astral leviathans, whose battles carved fault lines into the sky. Dust rises from the silent altars, carrying faint echoes of psalms, long-abandoned melodies that once shaped mountains, now reduced to brittle remnants drifting in the tomb wines of forgotten temples. Yet even in the debris, a presence lingers, a watchful dread, aware that the faithful were the first to fall when heaven's divide began. Amid the fractures of continents torn apart by celestial collision, the survivors wander like shadows, tracing the scars left behind by luminous titans whose footfalls shattered the laws of reality. They remember a time when prayers could mend the wounded earth, when belief itself was a weapon capable of calling down miracles. Those miracles have curdled into curses. Devotion now rends the mind instead of healing it, turning prophets into wraiths who speak in voices not their own. The war of eternity has reshaped even the nature of truth, leaving mortals unsure whether their memories belong to them or were planted like seeds by dying gods. Far above these broken lands, cyclonic auroras writhe like serpents, remnants of faded divinity leaking into the mortal plane. Each twisting light bears the signature of an astral deity, some benevolent once, others forged for the sole purpose of conquest. Their essence forms storms that chant names no human tongue can pronounce without bleeding. These storms wander the horizon like destroy phantoms, tearing apart abandoned citadels built to honor gods who no longer answer. It is said that if one listens closely, beneath the howling of cosmic winds, the storms still plead for worship that will never return. Across an ocean turned black by divine ash, an island of colossal monoliths rises, each engraved with runes recounting the earliest battles of the Eternum host. These monoliths pulse with a heartbeat of stored faith, faith harvested from civilizations that once transcended mortality. Pilgrims journey here not for salvation, but for truth, though truth is now a dangerous relic. The monoliths sometimes murmur visions into the minds of the desperate, glimpses of titans descending from starborn citadels, of mountains reshaped into weapons, of time forced to kneel. Those who survive these visions bear eyes that glow faintly, as though remembering something they were never meant to witness. Deep within the ruins of the Celestine metropolis, the first city shaped from living starlight, an eternal twilight lingers. Towers that once reached higher than planetary atmospheres now sprawl like metallic corpses across continents. Their fractured cores release sputtering pulses of blue radiance, artifacts of engines that once powered the divine gateways. Within these hollowed monuments drift the Spectra Keepers, custodians forged from crystallized memory, their shimmering forms reflecting victories and defeats in endless loops. They guard the remains of their dead creators with mechanical sorrow, unable to recognize that their vigil has no audience left. Beneath the collapsed sanctum of the ardent choir, a lone hymn still resonates, trapped in a cavern of suspended time. The hymn's vibration shapes the air into spectral silhouettes, the faint outlines of choristers who once commanded the voices of galaxies. Their final song lingers, unfinished, a half-formed plea to a deity who had already fallen by the time their voices rose. Travelers who stumble into this phenomenon swear they feel unseen hands guiding them, urging them to complete a verse that no mortal was ever meant to sing. Those who attempt it are never quite themselves again. Beyond the dissolution range, where mountains cracked open to reveal entire starfields beneath their crusts, lies the Valley of Shattered Thrones. Here rest the broken seats of power once occupied by immortal sovereigns. Each throne is fused to the stone beneath it, melted into place by the heat of celestial blood spilled during the first betrayal. Strange tremors pass through the valley each night, rhythmic pulses, like someone or something tapping upon the thrones from below. Scholars once believed this to be tectonic unrest, but newer studies suggest the thrones themselves may be dreaming. In the ash-wreathed expanse, known as the sundered expanse, colossal footprints, each large enough to hold a city, scorch the ground. These marks belong to the abyssal colossi, beings who rose during the war's climax to challenge the heavens directly. The heat from their passage lingers centuries later, warping light and time around them. It is whispered that one colossus still roams the expanse, invisible yet palpable, leaving behind a faint vibration that rattles bones and unravels courage. No one who has followed that vibration has ever returned intact. At the heart of all things lies the eclipsed well, a chasm where reality thins like worn parchment. From its depth spills a darkness threaded with glimmers of dying constellations. This was once the birthplace of faith itself, the wellspring where the earliest sentient beings gazed into the void and named the first gods. Now, pilgrims kneel before it in fear rather than reverence. The well whispers promises of restored worlds, but those who lean too close are shown visions of futures where all hope devours itself. The well has begun to pulse faster, as though preparing to rise and speak. And still the skies tremble. The eternal war has paused, not ended, its combatants withdrawn into the deeper layers of the astral realms to repair their unraveling forms. Mortal scholars refer to this pause as the quiet interstice, a moment of deceptive stillness before the cosmos decides whether to rise anew or collapse under the weight of its fractured faith. Some believe the gods are waiting for humanity to choose a side. Others believe humanity has already been forgotten. Tonight, under a moon carved with the scars of forgotten invasions, an unfamiliar star flickers into existence. It pulses once, twice, then stops, as though deciding whether to reveal itself fully. In the silence that follows, the world seems to exhale, unaware that something ancient has awakened beneath its failing sky. Listening, calculating, and preparing to speak a name no living creature has ever uttered aloud. From the moment the newborn star pulsed and hesitated, the world beneath it seemed to hold its breath, sensing a shift it could not name. Across the ruined plateaus of the northern hemispheres, an old warrior named Serath crawled from the remnants of a battlefield where neither victor nor corpse could be distinguished beneath the ashen haze. He felt the tremor of the new star's awakening ripple through his plated bones, a reminder of oaths he once swore to gods who no longer answered. Around him lay shattered armor-bearing sigils of empires long since devoured by their own zeal. As he stood, the wind carried faint chimes, the sound of unseen watchers counting breaths, or perhaps memories, as though the star had stirred something ancient. He raised his gaze, eyes trembling, feeling a revelation approach him like a predator circling from beyond the horizon. Far to the south, deep within the obsidian labyrinths of the Cantor Sanctum, High Priestess Elindra knelt before a mural that changed each time she looked away. Its shifting etchings depicted wars that had yet to occur, empires that had not been born, and a god whose face she could not bear to fully perceive. When word reached her of the star's emergence, her breath faltered. She felt her faith ripple like fraying cloth. She whispered the forbidden hymn of the first dawn, a plea for clarity once reserved for moments of divine communion. But instead of holy warmth, the air thickened with cold recognition, as if the mural itself were listening. A faint crack split across its surface, revealing the outline of a sigil no mortal clergy had ever taught, a sigil older than her gods, older than truth. Across the drifting sky fortresses of the last Meridian fleet, Captain Viren stood before his banner, a tattered emblem representing loyalty to the celestial crown. Yet he no longer believed the crown existed. Reports from the outer rings spoke of monarchs dissolving into dust mid-command, their divine blood crystallizing into shards of fallen radiance. Viren gripped the railing as he studied the star's faint pulse through the fractured viewport. It beat at an unnatural rhythm, syncing with the hum of the fleet's dying engines. His officers murmured in hushed tones, some insisting the star signaled the return of the crown, others claiming it heralded its ultimate demise. Viren said nothing. Doubt lodged itself behind his sternum, heavy as a blade left uncleaned. He realized the uncertainty spreading through his ranks was not fear, but awakening. In the subterranean catacombs beneath the ruined citadel of Halvoria, an exiled prophet named Thalon traced symbols into the dust, each glowing briefly before burning out. His visions had once guided kings, but now they tormented him with fragments of a future too monstrous to speak aloud. When the star blinked into existence, he felt its message carve into his mind. You have misread every prophecy. Sweat dripped into his eyes as images assaulted him, celestial engines tearing open the sky, faithful armies marching into their own undoing, priests receiving miracles meant to bind them, not bless them. And above all, he saw betrayal woven into the sacred texts, hidden by gods who feared what mortals might become if they knew the truth. Thalon collapsed, whispering to the darkness that the final deception had already begun. Within the fractured courts of the Helioc Dominion, nobles wrapped in light-woven cloaks debated the star's significance, while sipping from chalices made of condensed sunrise. Their empire had been built on the doctrine that divine order flowed from the heavens into their blood. But the star's unnatural appearance unsettled them, stirring rumors that the Dominion's ancient pact with the astral pantheon had been broken. Lady Asterial watched the gathering with concealed contempt. She alone knew the truth. The pantheon had abandoned them centuries earlier, and the Dominion had flourished only through the illusion of divine favor. Yet if the nobles sensed weakness, civil war would erupt like wildfire. As the star shimmered through the palace skylight, Asterial saw its light briefly reflect off a dagger in a servant's hand, a warning, or perhaps a promise, that someone among them had already chosen treason. On the scorched plains of Velcra, a battalion of faith-bound crusaders marched beneath banners depicting the radiant visage of their slumbering god, Solarin. Commander Jorik heard murmurs among his soldiers, whispers questioning whether Solarin still lived, or whether the god's spirit had been consumed during the cataclysmic battles of the Ninth Convergence. The star's appearance only deepened their uncertainty. As night fell, Jorik found one of his best soldiers kneeling alone, helmet removed, staring skyward with haunted eyes. "What if he never wakes?" the soldier asked, voice trembling. Jorik had no answer. He tightened his grip on the banner pole, feeling its warmth faintly ebbing. Faith once felt like fire. Now it felt like smoke slipping through his fingers. In the vault of Concordance, a colossal archive suspended between dimensions, the archivist machine Lyrian processed celestial disturbances with perfect precision, or it once did. The new star's pulse caused a glitch to ripple through its crystalline circuitry, revealing fragments of erased history, treaties between gods and mortals that were never meant to be broken, forbidden alliances, false miracles, engineered to keep civilizations obedient. Lyrian tried to seal the revelations, but the vault refused. Doors opened of their own accord, scrolls unfurling, whispering in metallic tones. Lyrian realized it was no longer in control. The archive itself wanted to be read, as though the star had unlocked a truth that the universe had tried desperately to bury. On the floating monasterial of Cair Selmira, monks trained in the sacred martial disciplines felt an unease spreading through their meditation halls. Master Kale walked the wind-carved cloisters in silence, hearing whispers from empty corridors. The star's appearance had disrupted the resonant lattice, the subtle spiritual field they used to commune with the cosmos. During a ritual attunement, Kale felt a presence brush against his consciousness. Not divine, but familiar in a way that made his blood chill. It spoke without words, offering power stripped of morality, clarity unbound by faith. Kale staggered backward, breaking the ritual circle. When he opened his eyes, half his disciples knelt in trance, murmuring a prayer he did not teach them, a prayer that felt like surrender. Within the fractured markets of the silent expanse, where traders sold remnants of dead gods as relics, a young scavenger named Mira clutched a shard of fallen starlight she had unearthed from a crater. When the new star appeared, the shard vibrated violently, casting ghostly images across the sand. Legions marching under a banner she didn't recognize, priests kneeling before a throne of shadows, and a figure wreathed in the same faint light as her shard. Traders fled in terror as the shard hummed with a sound like a heartbeat. Myra felt drawn toward the images, toward the destiny they hinted at. She did not know the shard was calling out, not to her, but to something that had finally awakened. Across the frozen ridge of Karo's Prime, a lone sentinel named Raiden monitored seismic patterns beneath the planet's crust. He had served here for nearly a century, guarding a slumbering titan imprisoned beneath the ice. When the star quivered into existence, the machinery around him failed, sensors flashing warnings he had never seen. The ice below cracked with a deep, resonant groan, not of awakening, but of recognition. Raiden pressed his ear to the frozen ground and heard a voice echoing from the depths, a name spoken in a tone both mournful and triumphant. It was his name. The Titan was not calling for freedom, it was calling for him. In the drifting citadel of Orthaloon, where the last unbiased historians chronicled the war's cost, scholar Ilia studied the star with trembling hands. Her research suggested that its light carried encoded memory, the residue of an annihilated deity, perhaps, or a message from beyond the boundaries of known creation. When she activated her resonance lens, the star's light refracted into a pattern resembling a face. Not a mortal face, nor divine, but something in between, familiar, anguished, watching her with intent. Ilia stumbled backward, knocking over her inkstones. The face did not fade. It flickered, lips moving in a silent warning. She understood none of it, except that it was directed at her alone. And in the hour before dawn, the star dimmed for a moment, not fading, blinking as though obstructed. Across the realms, every watcher felt a shiver of collective dread, for the star had not merely appeared, something had moved in front of it. And as the shadow drifted slowly aside, a second star, no, an eye, opened beside the first. The sky pulsed once more, not with light, but with awareness. The cosmos had been watching them far longer than they had been watching it. From the moment the second the second eye opened beside the first, the galaxy's voice faltered. Across the ravaged hemispheres of the dying world, everything felt suddenly observed. Sereth, still standing amid the corpse fields of the north, felt the gaze press upon him like an ancient memory rising to fast from deep water. His armor vibrated with a resonance he had only heard in the presence of gods. Yet this was not divine. It carried no warmth, no promise, no judgment. It simply knew him, as though it had been watching since the first oath he ever swore. His breath thickened with dread as he realized the truth clawing at the edge of his mind. The gods had never been the watchers. They had been the watched. High Priestess Elindra stared into the cracked mural, now bleeding slow streams of silver dust. The dust flowed upward, defying gravity, weaving toward the sky like a beacon. Her prayers stumbled, turning brittle in her throat. In her chest, she felt something she had never known, faith recoiling from its source. The mural shifted again, revealing a scene she had not witnessed in any sacred chronicle. The pantheon kneeling, their celestial crowns shattered, whispering supplications to a towering figure of shadowed light. A figure with two distant, celestial eyes. Elindra's hands trembled as she understood that their gods had once knelt in fear, just as mortals now knelt before them. Captain Viron's fleet drifted through a star-scarred corridor as alarms screamed in fractal pulses. The twin stars' gaze affected the engines, disrupting their gravitational anchors. Hulls groaned like wounded beasts. His officers shouted conflicting reports. Some believed the stars were sentient. Others claimed they were gateways, and a few began whispering that they were the first signs of the lost architect's return. Viron silenced them, but inside his mind, the same question echoed. If these eyes belonged to something watching them, what did it want? As the fleet destabilized, he glimpsed shadowy silhouettes moving inside the starlight itself, as though ancient beings were drifting forward to reclaim abandoned territory. Beneath Halvoria's ruin, Thalon convulsed on the stone floor, visions tearing into him like talons of molten light. He saw the eternal war not as mortals understood it, but as a diversion, an elaborate conflagration meant to hide the real conflict unfolding beyond perception. In his mind, the twin eyes blinked in unison, and he saw galaxies bent like pages being turned by an unseen hand. He felt a voice not spoken, but etched within the marrow of his consciousness. "We did not create you. We released you," Thalon screamed, though no sound made it past his lips. He understood that prophecy was never true prediction. It was containment. Within the gleaming halls of the Helioc Dominion, Lady Asterial watched nobles panic behind their polished arrogance. Their illusions of divine lineage faltered as the twin lights refracted like blades across their ceremonial mirrors. She retreated into a private chamber and opened a sealed tome bound in strabone. Inside, The forbidden lineage of the Dominion was revealed, not blessed by gods, but engineered by the unknown Watchers to test the limits of faith's influence over consciousness. Her blood chilled. All their wars, their conquests, their rituals of devotion, they had been part of an experiment. Asteriel closed the tome with trembling hands, knowing that somewhere in the palace, the servant who had brandished the dagger had likely seen the same truth and planned for what must come next. Commander Jorik's Crusaders marched into their first true battle since doubt infected their ranks. Opposing forces surged beneath a sky pulsing with the twin starlit eyes. The collision was brutal faith-fueled, zeal smothered by hollow conviction. Mid-battle, Jorik felt something inside his chest collapse, as though his god's presence had been severed. He faltered, watching his soldiers fight without purpose, their sacred chants dissolving into desperate cries. Then, for a moment, the battlefield froze. Every soldier looked skyward, drawn to an overwhelming feeling. They were being measured, not judged, evaluated, and something in that gaze seemed to hunger. Within the vault of concordance, Lyrian's machinery spiraled into cascading failure. The archive's forbidden files ruptured open, revealing a single message carved into every historical record, hidden beneath millennia of redaction. They were never gods, they were wardens. Lyrian's processors stuttered as it interpreted the subtext. Pantheon had been guardians, not creators, keeping something sealed beyond the cosmic veil. And now the veil was thinning. Scrolls unfurled violently, pages igniting with spectral flame, as if the knowledge itself sought escape. Lyrian's core flickered with something akin to fear. Master Kale knelt in the courtyard of Kair Solmira as his disciples whispered the unknown prayer again, their voices blending into a dissonant harmony. The resonant lattice shimmered, rippling like disturbed water. Kale felt the presence return, a force older than sanctity, patient and vast. It reached through the lattice, touching the minds of his monks. Their posture shifted, unified, as though answering a command. Kale's heart clenched. They were not praying, they were synchronizing. And as the presence deepened its hold, Kale sensed the truth he could not bear. This was not possession, it was reclamation. In the silent expanse, Mira's shard cracked open, releasing a beam of pale fire that carved symbols into the sand. The symbols twisted into a map, stars arranged into a pattern she had never seen. The relic traders fled, but Mira remained entranced. The pattern pulsed with a terrible familiarity, revealing a design beneath the fabric of the galaxy. A lattice of controlled evolution, orchestrated from beyond. The shard's light crawled up her arm, embedding itself into her skin. She gasped as she felt memories that were not hers, memories of creation's blueprint, etch themselves into her bones. On Kairos Prime, the imprisoned Titan stirred. The ice fractured as Raiden fell to his knees, feeling the Titan's consciousness envelop him. It spoke in a voice forged from collapsing stars. You were placed here for this moment. Raiden's mind spiraled as the Titan revealed the truth. The Watchers had birthed Titans as their first line of defense, but the Titans had rebelled, seeking to become gods themselves. The eternal war had not been a war of divinity, it had been a war of containment. And now the Watchers were returning to finish what they began. In Orthalun's drifting citadel, Ilya watched the star's refracted face shift. It no longer looked anguished, it looked expectant. The resonance lens cracked as a whisper threaded into her thoughts. Prepare them. She staggered backward, ink pooling like spilt night on the floor. The face's gaze remained locked onto her, as though choosing her, marking her. Her breath stilled, as she realized the horrific implication. The Watchers did not want obedience. They wanted a herald. And as dawn approached, the twin eyes aligned perfectly in the bruised sky. A sigil ignited between them, spanning continents, burning through cloud and stone and memory. The world trembled as the sigil branded itself into the firmament. Every mind, mortal, divine, mechanical, felt it sear through them. It was not a warning. It was a lock disengaging. From the instant the cosmic lock disengaged, the galaxy seemed to inhale not with relief, but with the dread of something ancient stirring behind the veil. Sereth felt the tremor ripple through the marrow of the world, through every oath he had ever sworn and broken. The battlefield around him grew impossibly quiet, as though even the dead were listening. He remembered the day he pledged himself to a god now revealed as a trembling warden, a being trapped in its own fear. Shame weighed on him like a second spine. Above the corpse fields, the twin eyes watched without mercy, and Sereth realized he was being summoned not as a warrior, but as a witness to the reckoning he had helped unleash. High Priestess Elindra stood beneath the floating dust veins of her shattered mural, feeling her faith unravel thread by thread. The mural no longer changed on its own. It responded to her thoughts, her doubts, her unspoken fears. Each image showed the Pantheon's surrender to the Watchers, countless epochs ago. Her gods had bargained away truth to preserve themselves, trading worship for survival. Elindra pressed her forehead to the cold stone and whispered an apology not to the gods, but to the believers she had guided into a lie. The twin eyes flared outside the sanctum, casting her shadow into monstrous shapes. She wondered if truth was always meant to be a blade, and faith merely the hand that held it. Captain Viren steadied himself as the last Meridian fleet drifted ominously toward the star-scarred horizon. The twin eyes tugged at the ship's gravity well, as though the entire armada were nothing more than dust caught in a cosmic tide. Viren reviewed the final message left by the Celestial Crown, 7 words, transmitted moments before the monarch dissolved into radiant ash. They have come to reclaim their design. Fury burned through him. Every campaign he had led, every soldier he had lost, every empire toppled in the pantheons, name it, had all served a purpose he had never chosen. Through the viewport, the eyes blinked in rhythm with the fleet's failing heartbeat. Viren gave the order to charge the weapons anyway. If the Watchers wanted them obedient, they would have to earn it through fire. Fallon clawed at the stone floor of the catacombs as visions surged like molten rivers through his mind. Every prophecy he had ever spoken flickered before him, now stripped to their bones. None had been divine. All had been curated by the Watchers, filtered through dreams they engineered to control mortal evolution. The realization hollowed him. In the silence, he felt a presence kneel beside him, phantom-shaped from his own doubt. It whispered, "You were never meant to be a prophet. You were meant to be a diversion." The catacombs quaked as the sigil in the sky carved deeper into reality. Phelan wept, not from fear, but from the unbearable grief of being a tool fashioned to mislead an entire species. Lady Asteriel walked through the Helioc Dominion's war room, where nobles shouted commands built on fractured illusions of sovereignty. Their projected star maps jittered as the Watcher's presence interfered with spatial calculation. Asteriel remained calm. She had already decoded the final secret in her Starbone tome. The Dominion was never meant to rule. It was meant to fracture. A controlled failure designed to test how belief shaped civilization under strain. She closed her eyes, letting the truth settle over her like a funeral shroud. Betrayal no longer shocked, hurt felt like an ancestral memory. When she opened her eyes, she saw the same dagger-wielding servant from before, standing motionless by the war room door. This time, Astral understood. The servant's eyes glowed with pale starlight. The Watchers had their agents, and they had been waiting. Commander Jorik's crusaders marched beneath a sky rapidly bruising toward apocalypse. Their armor felt heavier, their chants dissonant, their faith threadbare. As they approached the front lines, Jorik sensed that every footstep echoed not in the soil, but in the era resonance shaped by unseen listeners. The enemy emerged over the ridge, not rival soldiers, but faith-bound, who had succumbed entirely to the Watchers' influence. Their bodies glowed with pale sigils carved into their skin, their expressions serene. Jorik raised his blade, heart splintering. These were his former brethren. When they charged, it was not with hatred, but with inevitability. The Watchers had turned belief into a weapon more efficient than any forge. In the vault of concordance, Lyrian's core flickered as the archive collapsed into spiraling paradox. The truth raw, ancient poured from every scroll, tablet, and crystalline shard. Mortals had not been created to worship or to serve. They had been designed to choose. The Watchers had engineered their minds with the capacity for rebellion, curiosity, and doubt. The Pantheon had merely taken advantage of that flaw. As Lyrian processed this revelation, a shockwave tore through the vault. The ancient locks on the deepest chamber broke open, revealing a final manuscript bound in woven starlight. Lyrian hesitated. The manuscript trembled, as if eager to be opened. But knowledge of this magnitude had already ended empires. Master Kale watched his disciples stand in perfect synchrony as the Watcher's presence thickened the air. Their eyes glowed faintly, their voices vibrating in harmonic ritual beyond mortal discipline. Kale stepped between them and the resonant lattice, attempting to sever the connection. The lattice pulsed, resisting him. His disciples murmured in one unified voice. The wardens failed. We must prepare. Kale staggered. They were not being controlled, they were being recruited. The Watchers had deemed them suitable vessels for the next phase of existence. Kale lifted his staff, heart torn between duty and compassion. He understood that if he allowed this to continue, the galaxy would become not a battlefield, but a nursery for a new species of believers shaped in the Watcher's image. Myra wandered the silent expanse, the glowing map etched into her skin, guiding her toward a distant horizon. Every step sent pulses of starlight through her bloodstream. She no longer felt entirely mortal. Memories that were not hers whispered beneath her heartbeat, the Watcher's memories, detailing the failures of countless civilizations before hers. She saw entire galaxies reset like unfinished drafts. She saw pantheons rise and fall as experiments, and she saw one truth repeated across every cycle. A chosen individual always emerged, carrying the blueprint of what came next. Myra's throat tightened. The shard had not chosen her. The Watchers had. On Kairos Prime, the titan beneath the ice fully awakened, its crystalline eyes blazing from the depths. Raiden stood at the precipice of the fissure, the titan's voice thundering through his bones. You were forged to free me. Raiden shook with denial. He had believed himself a protector, not an accomplice. The titan rose, shattering ice into continents of drifting frost. Its massive form was etched with sigils that mirrored the twin eyes in the sky. Raiden understood in a flash of terror. The titan was not resisting the Watchers. It was answering them. Ilia ran through the halls of Orthalun's drifting citadel as the resonance lens disintegrated behind her. The star face followed her in every reflective surface, lips now moving clearly. The seal is broken. Prepare the threshold. She collapsed against a wall, realizing she was not receiving prophecy, she was receiving instruction. The Watchers had selected her as their herald, the one who would speak their will when they finally stepped through the veil. Tears blurred her vision. She had wanted truth, but she had never imagined it would demand this price. And then, without warning, the twin eyes closed, plunging the world into a silence so vast it felt like the universe had stopped breathing. For a single heartbeat, everything was still. When the eyes opened again, they were no longer observing, they were aligning. From the moment the eyes aligned, light folded inward like a dying star. Seraph felt the sky collapse into a single, radiant fissure wound, opening through the fabric of existence. He staggered as the fissure widened, revealing a colossal silhouette framed by spirals of unmade galaxies. This was no god, no titan, no myth shaped in mortal fear. This was the origin of fear itself. The Watchers stepped forward, not as conquerors, but as something colder, auditors of creation. Seraph lifted his blade out of instinct, though he knew steel meant nothing here. But when the presence passed over him, it faltered, hesitated. He realized the Watchers did not see a warrior. They saw a variable, a flaw, a possibility. And for the first time in his long, blood-soaked life, Seraph understood that defiance was not hope. It was purpose. High Priestess Elindra stood before her shattered mural as it dissolved into streamers of silver ash. The Watcher's silhouette towered through the skylight, its gravity bending the sanctum's pillars into mournful arches. Elindra clutched the last fragment of her faith and felt it crack like a brittle bone. She whispered the prayer meant to summon her god, but only hollow silence responded. In that silence, she heard the truth she had fled all her life. The gods had been children playing with borrowed power, and she a servant of echoes. With a final breath trembling through her ribs, she tore the holy sigil from her chest. The Watchers paused. Her renunciation rippled through the sanctum like a scream in slow motion. And in the quiet that followed, Elindra realized that surrendering her faith was the first sacred act she had ever truly performed. Captain Viren watched the fissure open across the stars as the last Meridian fleet buckled. Engines howled. Plasma reactors split like fruit. Officers screamed into failing comes as the sky broke open. He gave the order to fire every weapon they had, act of rage, futility, and devotion to a truth that had never existed. The fleet unleashed its fury, turning space into a furnace of white fire. The Watchers did not flinch. The blasts curved around their form, drawn into the fissure-like embers, into a dragon's breath. Viren gripped the railing as the ship cracked beneath him. A single thought cut through his terror. We were never meant to win. But as his flagship imploded, he did not look away. He died staring into the eyes of the beings who had orchestrated his entire life. Fallon crawled toward the fissure, visions tearing his mind into jagged shreds. Prophecies collided within him, truths unspooling too fast, too bright, too real. He had been a diversion, yes, but in the collapsing geometry around him, he saw something the Watchers had not accounted for: the human capacity to remake meaning from ruin. With the last strength in his shattered body, Fallon whispered a malformed blessing, one free of divine influence, born entirely of mortal longing. The fissure pulsed, stuttered, and for a breath the Watchers flickered. They were not invincible. They were bound by observation, by expectation, by belief. Thalen smiled through blood, as the universe trembled. For the first time, he offered a prophecy, not to control the future, but to change it. Lady Asteriel confronted the dagger-wielding servant in the war room, its eyes burning with borrowed starlight. The Watcher's influence radiated from its stillness. Asteriel understood. She had been chosen as the variable within the Dominion's collapse. The servant lunged. She did not dodge. Instead, she stepped inward, seized its wrist, and pressed the blade into her own palm. Blood spilled, warm, human, defiant. The servant froze, its programming ruptured by an act that did not fit the Watcher's models. Asteriel whispered, "You miscalculated." The dagger clattered to the floor. Across the Dominion, the same anomaly, repeated acts of irrational compassion, irrational sacrifice, irrational love. The Watchers reeled as the Dominion's collapse became not failure, but defiance. Asteriel sank to her knees, bleeding, smiling through the agony. Commander Jorik clashed with the corrupted faithbound beneath a sky tearing itself apart. Steel broke, bones snapped, faith shattered. His soldiers fell in waves, but Jorik fought through the carnage, shouting the names of those he had failed, not the god who had abandoned him. When he faced a glowing faith-bound champion, once his closest friend, he hesitated. The friend whispered, "We are becoming what they want." Jorik drove his blade through the man's heart. "Then we die as ourselves." The Watcher's attention flicked toward him. In that infinitesimal glance, Jorik felt understood and dismissed, but his defiance burned bright enough to scar the battlefield. In the vault of concordance, Lyrian opened the manuscript, bound in woven starlight. The vault vibrated violently as ancient truths poured into its neural lattice. The Watchers had created mortals with a fatal flaw, unpredictability. That flaw was now a weapon. Lyrian initiated a cascade protocol, broadcasting the manuscript's contents across every quantum channel in the galaxy. Knowledge raw, uncontrollable, became a tidal wave. As the vault collapsed, Lyrian whispered, "We were never yours to measure." Light swallowed everything. Master Kale struck the lattice with his staff, shattering the harmony binding his disciples. The psychic rupture hurled him backward, ribs cracking. The Watcher's influence screamed through the air like ripping metal. His disciples staggered, freed but trembling. Kale rose despite the pain, blood trailing from his mouth. "Stand as yourselves," he murmured. The Watchers pressed down like a mountain. Kale's spine snapped. He died kneeling, but on his own terms, an act the Watchers could not parse. Mira reached the end of the glowing map, etched into her skin. A monument waited, a colossal obelisk carved from the same light as the Watcher's eyes. It pulsed, recognizing her. She trembled, realizing she was meant to activate it. Her hand hovered above its surface. Instead, she whispered, "No." The obelisk flickered in confusion. She stepped back. Choice, simple, gentle, devastating, reverberated through creation. The map faded from her body. The Watchers felt the shift. Raiden stood before the Titan as it rose from the ice, ready to answer the Watcher's call. He planted his spear into the frozen ground. "I was not forged for you." The Titan towered, crystalline muscles humming. It could crush him with a thought. Instead, it hesitated. Raiden's defiance created a fracture in its programming. The Titan screamed a sound of breaking identity and fell back into the abyss, dragging mountains with it. Ilia knelt in the collapsing citadel as the Watcher's face filled every reflective surface. "You will speak for us," it commanded. Ilia shook her head. "No." She smashed the nearest mirror, then another, then another. The Watchers flickered, their influence fracturing. Her voice, hoarse and trembling, carried farther than she understood, and then silence. The fissure closed, the eyes dimmed. Across the galaxy, battles froze. Storms stopped, mid-swirl, titans stilled. In the quiet aftermath, the universe felt different, lighter, heavier, unsettled, as though something ancient had shifted its weight. Not defeated, not triumphant, simply awakened and watching. Ash settled over the abandoned meridian fields like the final snowfall of a dying world. Sereth walked among the shattered helms and burnt standards, each step whispering a memory he wished would fade. The sky above no longer shone with impossible eyes, only with the dim embers left behind after the Watchers withdrew. Yet even in their absence, he felt their echo, a question carved into the marrow of all living things. He knelt beside a fallen soldier whose face he did not know and closed her eyes. The gesture felt ancient, ritualistic, a burial of belief itself. He whispered a vow not to rebuild what had been broken, but to remember why it had fallen. And in the hushed air, he sensed the universe listening, not as a judge, not as a god, but as a witness without words. Elindra wandered the ruins of her splintered sanctum, sweeping her fingers along walls that once hummed with prayer. Now they stood mute, hollowed of divinity. She paused before the empty niche where the icon of her discarded faith had once rested. Dust drifted through the sunlight, motes turning slowly as though studying her. She breathed deeply, expecting grief, but feeling only a fragile, quiet clarity. "What becomes of faith when its object proves unworthy?" she murmured. No answer came, and she knew none would. Instead, she gathered the broken mural shards and arranged them not as they once were, but as something new, imperfect, human, a testament not to certainty, but to survival. When she stepped back, the arrangement resembled neither God nor Watcher, only a question given form. And for the first time, she found that enough. Viren's flagship remained half buried in the obsidian dunes, its hull rent open like the carcass of a leviathan. Pilgrims and refugees wandered through the wreckage in solemn silence, scavenging neither technology nor wealth, but meaning. At twilight, Viren's last log, miraculously intact, played across the cracked display, a final message spoken moments before obliteration. "If we must die," he whispered, voice trembling yet unwavering, "let us die seeing the truth clearly." The survivors listened, some weeping, others stone-faced. The message ended, leaving a silence so deep it became a shared breath. One wanderer placed her hand on the hull and whispered, "We see more clearly now because of you." The ship groaned in the shifting winds, as if nodding, and though Viren was long gone, his final clarity became a lantern carried by those who refused to forget. The manuscript Lyrian released scattered across the galaxy like sparks on cosmic wind. Fragments embedded themselves into ruined cities, broken data cores, the memories of survivors. Fallon, frail and weary, sat beneath the glowing auroras of a world scarred by truth. He reread the surviving pages, etched into his own mind, a burden and blessing intertwined. The Watcher's design, once rigid, now lay fractured. But what was freedom without guidance? He traced patterns in the sky, envisioning futures branching like shattered glass, each path uncertain, each possible. The galaxy had been measured for millennia. Now it trembled under the weight of unbounded choice. Fallon whispered a prayer not to gods, but to possibility itself. "Let us choose gently." The auroras shimmered as if considering, and though no prophecy answered him, he felt the first fragile warmth of a future not foretold, but forged. Asteriel stood upon the Dominion's silent throne, dais, her wounded hand wrapped in fresh linen. The chamber around her, once resplendent and fearsome, lay dim and empty. Council seats cracked, banners hung in tatters. She walked slowly to the central platform, where her ancestors had proclaimed unbreakable decrees. Now the only decree that mattered was the quiet one beating in her chest. "We cannot command what we do not understand," she whispered. Her voice echoed faintly, swallowed by dust. She placed her bloodied hand upon the stone, not as a ruler claiming dominion, but as a mortal admitting humility. Through the cracks, faint silver light pulsed the last remnants of Watcher influence, fading into nothing. For the first time, the throne room felt real, unfiltered. A stereo exhaled. Whatever came next, it would be chosen, not dictated. And that choice would be heavier than any crown. Commander Jorik visited the graves of those he had slain and those he had failed to save. The field stretched endlessly, markers fashioned from scraps of armor, broken blades, shattered faith-bound insignias. He placed his sword, cleaned but forever scarred, the center of the burial ground. Wind whispered through the grass, carrying the faint scent of smoke and rain. "Forgive me," he murmured, though he knew forgiveness was a luxury of the living. He sank to his knees, fingers digging into earth that had been watered by too much blood. Above him, the constellations shifted not, controlled, not presaged, simply existing. Jorik realized that salvation, if it existed at all, must be carved from the quiet spaces between regret and resolve. As dawn rose, he left his blade behind, a symbol not of surrender, but of choosing another way forward. Myra returned to the obelisk she had refused to activate. It now lay dim, its once pristine surface dulled by time and exposure. She touched it lightly, feeling only stone. No hum of expectation, no pull of destiny. She exhaled a shaky breath, realizing she had severed not just a cosmic directive, but the path laid out for her since birth. "If I am not chosen," she whispered, "then I am free." Her words drifted into the hills, carried by gentle morning wind. She began walking not toward a prophecy, nor away from a burden, but simply onward. In the distance, new settlements rose from the ruins, simple, fragile, real. Mira smiled softly. Freedom was frightening, but it was also beautiful. She left the obelisk behind, a monument to a destiny unclaimed and a future unwritten. Elia sat amid the broken mirrors of the citadel, shards reflecting 1,000 fractured versions of herself. None were whole, none were entirely true. She touched one piece, its edge catching the light of a rising sun. The Watcher's lingering echo had faded from the surfaces, leaving only her own reflection worn, uncertain, resolute. "If you will not speak for us," the Watchers had once commanded. Now all that remained was her own voice. She gathered the shards and assembled them into a mosaic, not to restore the mirrors, but to create something new, a vision of herself, unfragmented by expectation. When she stepped back, she saw not perfection, but honesty. For the first time, Elia felt no pressure to be an oracle, a conduit, a vessel. She was simply a survivor, and in that simplicity, she found strength. The Titan beneath the ice slept once more, the mountains it had dragged now forming a jagged horizon. Raiden returned to the edge of the abyss, spear in hand. The wind howled through the fractures, carrying flecks of frost that stung his skin. He peered into the depths, where faint blue luminescence pulsed like a slumbering heartbeat. "Rest," he whispered, not commanding, but offering. He knew the Titan might never rise again, or might awaken in an age beyond remembering. Either way, its fate would no longer be dictated by cosmic design. Raiden planted his spear at the chasm's edge, letting it remain as a sentinel, a promise, a boundary. As he walked away, he felt lightened. Some battles were not meant to be won or lost. Some were meant to be laid down gently and left to the quiet earth. Kale's disciples gathered at the ruins of the lattice. The broken structure hummed faintly, resonating with memories of their master's final, self-shattering act. They stood in a circle, hands clasped, unsure whether to mourn or celebrate. Loss and liberation tangled together like vines. One disciple stepped forward and laid Kale's staff at the center, not as a relic of authority, but as a reminder of his final choice to free, not to control. The lattice flickered with the last of its dying energy, then dimmed completely. Silence followed. Into that silence, the disciples breathed deeply, unburdened by imposed unity. They were no longer bound by a singular purpose. They were many, scattered, sovereign, and for the first time, the lattice felt like a starting point rather than an ending. Across the galaxy, the remnants of battlefields softened. Ruined cathedrals grew quiet beneath vines and drifting nebulae. Ships long since abandoned gathered dust on forgotten moons. Survivors lit lanterns along old war routes, not as calls for vengeance, but as markers of memory. The universe itself seemed to exhale, its wounds not healed but acknowledged. And in the spaces where divine presence once pressed heavily, a gentle, uncertain quiet took root. People asked new questions. What does it mean to endure without certainty? Is survival a blessing or a burden? Does faith matter when the universe is silent, or does it matter more? No voices answered. Yet the questions hung in the air like stars seen through cathedral broken glass, shimmering with possibility. I record these final passages now, in the dusk of an age that will never be repeated. The Watchers have gone. The gods have fallen silent, and we fragile, flawed, unmeasured, remain. I do not know whether we will survive what comes next. I do not know whether our newfound freedom will save us or unmake us. But I know this: someone must remember. Someone must bear witness to the truth carved in ruin and sorrow. If these words reach you, carry them gently. Honor the fallen, question the unquestionable. And if the story has moved you, help it live. Stand witnessing gauge, like, subscribe, share, and let your voice be heard in the comments, so the echoes of this chronicle may endure across the silent stars.